Good morning. I am coming from a very different perspective perhaps than some of the other presenters here today. Coming from a very large organization, Department of Health and Social Care in the City of Edinburgh Council. This department has a very diverse workforce, as you can understand. I think we recognize that there's been a rather haphazard and not systematic approach to induction over the years. I mean, I have spent many years in social work education as a practice teacher with social work students, and certainly was very strongly aware of the importance of a good induction for students who are often very anxious at the beginning, and that took a lot of trouble and time to help them understand the nature of the types of services that our organization presents. But I think I have only come into the responsibilities for induction myself within the last 9 months, having had other training duties over a number of years. And it's been very interesting to find out what we do have in our department. And as Keith described, we do have an induction event where the director comes along and speaks, and we have, I think, about 50 PowerPoint slides that people are shown on the induction event. But we also have a long-standing group of staff who have had a much more systematic induction process, and that's our home care staff, who are the greatest numbers in our workforce. I think I could have also included up there that we've got, I think, about 700 social care staff who are working in residential homes as well as in day centers, and also doing one-to-one work with people in their own homes. So it's quite a challenge to find a systematic approach to this diverse workforce. I mean, at the induction events we have people ranging from laundry assistants to last week at our March induction we had the new Chief Social Work Officer as well as a member of a participant in the group. But we have had this well-established home care induction pack, which I think has been in existence for probably 15 or 20 years and has evolved and developed. And I think probably contains a lot of the kind of materials that you were describing earlier in relation to health and safety and values and organizational and policy matters. But I think it's been recognized in the last few years that we do have a rather haphazard approach, and so I've been given the task in the last 6 to 9 months of trying to facilitate a much more consistent approach by our large department. The department induction event, I think, was implemented about 5 years ago, and this was around the time that our department, which was previously a Department of Social Work, became a Department of Health and Social Care 2 years ago, that we were seeking investors in people approval, and one of the requirements, I understand, and I wasn't involved in that directly, but was to have a much more visible induction approach and a strategy, and this is when the half-day event started, and also a induction pack was developed. The external driver, investors in people, and I think from what others have told me that the investors in people application was largely successful on the back of our home care induction package that was already well established. So we've had this half-day induction event, which in a fairly traditional manner is introduced by the director. There's PowerPoint presentations, and even in the last 6 months that I've been involved with it, I've had to change the slides almost every month. They're held monthly because we've been undergoing restructuring, and there's been different people in different places, and it's been quite hard to explain this to newcomers to the organization. But it's been a useful learning experience for me in terms of having worked in a small part of this organization for many years, I now have a much better understanding of the whole. We have a very brief small group session in the morning, the half day, which I felt was really quite cursory. I think we had 20 minutes with this diverse bunch of people, and I think the numbers ranged from sometimes 15 to 35. And there was a nice oldish council video, which is now slightly out of date, which has it's the only place in which there's a service user visible, whereas I think someone receiving home care services talks about that. But there's a lot of other stuff from other departments in the whole council talking about their attitude to customer care and a lot of positive things. I mentioned that there was an induction booklet that was produced in relation to the Investors in People application. These included, it was one booklet, and when I was asked to look at this last summer, and I found it rather confusing about who it was written for, whether it was written for the employee or for the manager. But it did contain checklists, and which were to be completed. The advice was within 3 months of the employee starting employment. But on checking with the induction support assistant that I was allocated last summer, I discovered that nobody had ever sent any checklists back, and nobody had ever followed up to see what people were actually doing in practice. So I think that was a recognition that we really needed to be much more on the ball with this. I think overall, and I think this day reflects a growing awareness amongst employers of the importance of induction in relation to the recruitment and retention of staff. I think that your document, Keith, actually echoes that, the importance of people getting a good experience when they first come to their job in order to develop that sense of belonging and identity with the values that you're trying to achieve. And I think having spoken and having been working with Edinburgh for almost 20 years, I think most of my peers, we've never had any formal induction. And I think also this recognition of a need for a more consistent approach. So over last summer I spent a few weeks revising the induction checklists, which we've now completed and launched to managers. And I divided them into two booklets, which this is an early copy of. They're quite short. They're only about 10 pages each, and they're quite similar. But it's left to the manager's responsibility. And we launched these in January, and we are keeping a database of all the staff who've attended induction, and we will be getting in touch with their managers in 3 months to remind them to send the checklist back. I was doing this starting last summer, and was very pleased to receive the guidance from the SSSC to check out that we were on the right lines. And I think we were pretty much there. There were a few additional pieces of legislation and policy that we have included in that. The induction checklist for the employees includes an evaluation form. Again, there had never been any received in the past, I understand, so we're going to follow that up much more actively.